The baby's crying at night was so loud, I changed the locks.
Well, what am I supposed to do then? When I asked David, for some reason, my in-laws' voices came back.
Sleep outside with the kid.
Laughing followed that unbelievable statement from my in-laws. So, the in-laws were in on it too. Realizing that, I let out a sigh and retorted. Fine, just don't complain about where I sleep.
Huh? What?
My in-laws and David let out a bewildered voice. They must have thought I had nowhere to go. But unfortunately for them, I do have a place to go, and it's somewhere inconvenient for them. They'll have to regret it after I've gone. I won't care what they say later. Right now, all that matters to me is Emily. If I can protect her, I don't care if you guys are ruined. I made up my mind and turned my back on my husband's family. My name is Mary. Next month, I'll be celebrating my 30th birthday, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. Though I'm a stay-at-home mom, I'm not doing housework right now. Not because I'm slacking off, but because my daughter Emily was born just 2 weeks ago, and I'm currently resting. So, I'm not doing any housework at all. But my husband David doesn't care about that.
Why aren't you doing the housework? Just want to slack off.
My Phil Robert, who was supposed to have attended the birth of my mill, seems to have no idea.
People usually start doing housework the day after.
It's really appalling that he can say that with such confidence. Doesn't anyone understand me? Things aren't going well with my husband, and I'm distant from my in-laws. I have no parents anymore, and no relatives to rely on. But even if I'm alone, I absolutely have to protect Emily. Thinking this, I've been able to keep going. Maybe getting married was a mistake. I've been thinking that a lot lately. But before we married, David and my in-laws were kind to me. Especially my in-laws, who even offered to pay for the wedding. Are you sure we can accept the wedding expenses from you?
It's our only son's wedding. We'd be laughed at by the relatives if we skimmed.
My mill, Susan, laughed as she said that. And my Phil Robert felt the same.
Both David and I work in the bridal industry. Many of our company's associates will be there, and we can afford a shabby wedding.
David and Robert work for the same bridal company. It's quite well known locally. Moreover, they have a wide range of businesses. Their main business is running a wedding venue, but it seems they also handle restaurants for receptions. In other words, many of their associates have a deep understanding of weddings. So that's why a cheap wedding was out of the question. I understood why my in-laws offered to cover the costs. Thanks to their help, David and I had a quite lavish wedding. But the good times ended with the wedding. Once I started living with my husband's family, my in-laws began to make demands.
Hey, Mary, still not pregnant?
Oh, well. I gave a vague response. Then, Susan dramatically sighed.
Huh, you're useless.
Useless? I asked back, surprised. But Susan quickly looked away.
It's nothing.
She obviously dodged a question. Is this bullying? The thought crossed my mind for a moment, but I felt indebted for the wedding expenses they covered. In the end, I couldn't confront Susan about it. On the other hand, Robert treated me like a housemaid.
Hey, there's no snacks.
Sorry. I'll prepare them now.
You should have done this before I got back. Pretty bad for a wife.
Robert started grumbling. I was shocked. What does he mean by for a wife? Am I supposed to take care of him too? I married David to be his wife. I'm willing to do anything for him. Of course, I intend to do my best for my in-laws as well. But being ordered around feels a bit off. Is this what they really think of me? I was bewildered by the sudden change in my in-laws' attitudes. However, I didn't have the courage to oppose them. I thought I'd be kicked out if I did. I quit my job when I got married. I don't have much savings left. Also, I have no parents. I mean, if I were to divorce, I'd have no one to rely on. That fear kept me from standing up to my in-laws. Even if Susan bullied me or Robert treated me like a maid, I had no choice but to endure. I suppressed my feelings deep inside. And so, 6 months have passed since our wedding. I felt suddenly sick while preparing breakfast and collapsed right there.
What's wrong?
Susan asked, sounding annoyed. Just feeling a bit.
Ha, so sloppy.
Sorry, just a moment, I said and rushed to the bathroom. But my condition didn't improve no matter how much time passed.
Hey, what are you doing, Mary? Leaving the housework undone. What are you going to do?
I am sorry.
Sorry isn't enough. I'm going to work, so make sure you do the housework. Got it?
David yelled loudly. I felt too sick to even respond. Hours passed, and I finally started to feel a bit better. However, Susan was waiting for me in the living room.
You've come up with a good excuse to skip housework.
I'm not trying to skip, it's just.
Don't talk back to me. Just quietly do the cleaning and laundry.
I flinched at Susan's loud voice. Unaware of my feelings, Susan was staring at me intently. I guess I have no choice but to do it. I sighed internally and began the housework. I managed to get through that day. But my health didn't fully recover for a long time. Eventually, suspecting something was wrong, I visited the hospital a few days later. To my surprise, I found out I was pregnant. I rushed home and first reported it to Susan. Suddenly, she changed her tune.
You were pregnant. You should have said so earlier.
Susan smiled cheerfully. Then, she suddenly started calling someone.
It's been a while. Actually, my deal is pregnant.
From her conversation, it seemed like she was bragging to relatives. I might get treated a bit better now. I harbored a faint hope. But I was wrong. Even knowing about my pregnancy, my in-laws' treatment of me didn't change. Worse, I overheard Robert saying something shocking.
Once the heir is born, we don't need deal anymore. My son could even divorce her.
Robert was gleefully talking on the phone with an acquaintance. I was genuinely horrified. The in-laws only needed an heir. I had a feeling because of the way they treated me. But hearing it said outright was heartbreaking. I bit my lip and continued with the housework. Of course, I considered consulting David. But as soon as he learned about my pregnancy, David started coming home late. When I asked why, David retorted,
You're pregnant now, so I've fulfilled my duty as a husband.
"What do you mean?"
If a wife doesn't get pregnant, relatives look down on us, right?
I cooperated just for that. David justified his selfish reasoning. What? Don't joke around.
Shut up. Just give birth. That's your duty as a wife.
David looked at me as if our marriage was just an obligation. At that moment, I realized everything. David won't help me. He's not even an ally. I'm all alone here. And my in-laws were kind to me before our marriage, not because they cared about me. They were nice just because they wanted a housekeeper who would give birth to their heir. As soon as I realized this, my tension snapped. All my love for David disappeared. That's right. Once this child is born, I'll get a divorce. From that day on, that's what I thought. If that's the case, I need to prepare for the divorce. In the few days leading up to the birth, I arranged for a private investigation into David and my in-laws' conduct. Time passed, and the day of the birth arrived. A beautiful baby girl was born. I named her Emily. The day I brought Emily home, both my in-laws and David seemed happy. However, their expressions gradually darkened. And then, an incident occurred. It happened on the day of Emily's 1-month checkup. After the checkup, the CEO of David's company, George, offered to drive me home. Apparently, George's daughter had given birth around the same time as me. We ended up having our checkups together, and through George's kindness, I was offered a ride home. However, when we arrived at my house, we encountered a problem. For some reason, the front door wouldn't open. In my confusion, I rang the doorbell and called out, "Hey, David, the front door won't open." Then, David's voice came from inside the house.
The baby's crying was so loud, I changed the locks.
You changed the locks on the door without telling me? I asked back, and David raised his voice.
She cries every day. I want some peace and quiet, so don't come back.
What am I supposed to do then? When I asked David again, for some reason, my in-laws' voices came back.
Sleep outside with the kid.
Laughing followed that unbelievable statement from my in-laws. So, the in-laws were in on it too. Realizing that, I let out a sigh mixed with resignation. Fine, just don't complain about where I sleep.
What?
My in-laws and David let out a bewildered voice. They must have thought I had nowhere to go. But unfortunately for them, I do have a place to go, and it's somewhere inconvenient for them. They'll just have to regret it after I've gone. I won't care what they say later. Right now, all that matters to me is Emily. If I can protect her, I don't care if you guys are ruined. I made up my mind and turned my back on my husband's family. I approached George. Well, you heard that, right?
Of course.
So, about what you mentioned earlier, could you please help me? I asked George. The topic in question was something George had discussed with me on the way home. There are several hotels aimed at postnatal care. George's company, which operates a bridal business, was also looking to incorporate this postnatal care.
We want to engage with our customers over the long term, from marriage to childbirth and parenting.
That's what George had said. And it was then that he had offered me to be a monitor for that plan. George nodded in response to my question.
I'll guide you there right away.
Thank you.
Regardless, that behavior is unacceptable.
George stared intently at my husband's family home. He was probably thinking of imposing some form of retribution on the three of them. Well, as a company CEO, especially one planning to venture into kids' business, he couldn't overlook this. Considering this, I made a proposal to George. It was a plan I had been contemplating since before the birth, and George nodded emphatically upon hearing it.
Let's cooperate on your proposal.
Thank you. This way, I gained a strong ally. However, my body was utterly exhausted. So, that day, I was sent directly to the postnatal care hotel. Thanks to George's influence, I was able to stay at the hotel. The postnatal care plan I experienced there was excellent. The hotel had professional staff like midwives available 24 hours, 7 days. Moreover, the support was comprehensive, and the environment was designed for relaxation. There were other new moms like me, and for the first time in a long while, I could relax. I wish I could stay here forever. I found myself uttering those words. I truly rested well. And the next day, George came to see me. In front of me, he made a call to David. Soon, David answered the phone.
Hello, David. Sorry to disturb you on your day off.
Hello, what can I do for you?
Well, I have a favor to ask.
George began with that introduction and then broached the subject.
I'd like you and your family to be models for a pamphlet. Could you do that?
My wife, myself, and my daughter as models.
See, your daughter was just born, right? Perfect for our pamphlet's model.
Indeed, for a bridal-related pamphlet, it could be considered an ideal assignment. But David had just kicked me out. There's no way he could accept under these circumstances. I smirked to myself. If David refused George's direct request, it would undoubtedly affect his career. That was my plan, to inflict damage on David. However, David accepted the offer without hesitation.
Sure, we'll do it. Leave it to us.
I panicked. This won't harm David at all. My plan has failed. That's when I saw George smirk. Then he said to David,
Then, come to the studio right away. How about in an hour?
An hour?
Yes, we'll have the staff ready.
David began to panic and interrupt as George was speaking.
Wait a minute, please. Today is just not possible.
Why not?
Well, I need to discuss it with my wife.
David started to stutter out excuses. It seemed he thought he had enough time to persuade me if given the chance. That's what you get for answering without thinking. Serves you right. I couldn't stop grinning.
Then, go talk to her right now. Your daughter has just been born. She must be around, right?
George pressed further. David fell completely silent. Eventually, David said he would discuss it and hung up the phone. Needless to say, he tried to call me relentlessly afterward. Of course, I ignored all of it. My phone rang non-stop for about 30 minutes. But finally, it seemed he gave up, and my phone went quiet. Immediately after, George's phone rang.
Well, my wife is saying she's too embarrassed.
I hadn't said anything of the sort. As I thought this, George audibly sighed in an exaggerated manner.
Can't even persuade your own wife, huh?
No, it's not like that.
I'm disappointed in you.
As George said this, David began to apologize loudly enough for me to hear.
I'm very sorry. I'll definitely persuade her.
His voice of apology sounded as if David was prostrating right in front of me. After making David apologize for a while, George ended the call. Then, he called Robert.
Hello, Robert, is it?
Hello, George. What can I do for you?
I have a gift for you. Would you accept it?
As he said this, George looked at me. I nodded with a smile, and then George spoke up.
You know that our company runs a restaurant for wedding receptions, right?
Of course.
I'm thinking of lending it to you.
Lending it.
Robert must have been puzzled. This was also part of my plan. First, George himself would offer to lend the spacious reception restaurant to Robert. Then, he suggested hosting a debut party for the grandchild there. Once the 1-month checkup is over, it's time for the baby to start going out for walks. That's the timing for the debut party. In a normal family, they might jump at such an opportunity. But my current family situation was different. Robert had just kicked me out, and there was no way I would accept an invitation from him. So, Robert started making excuses in a panic.
No, our family is. Well,
What? Are you refusing my gift?
no, not at all. It's just, I have to consider my daughter-in-law's health.
Robert began to say things he didn't mean. I was irked. But then, George chimed in.
Was there a problem at the 1-month checkup?
No, it's not that.
Then, have the debut party. I'll cover the costs, so don't worry. The date will be.
George continued to push forward with the arrangements. Throughout, I could hear Robert's panic voice leaking through. He's panicking. What's he going to do, I wonder? I was struggling to contain my laughter. Finally, George finished speaking and unilaterally ended the call. Immediately after, my phone began to ring. It's from Robert. I smirked, holding my smartphone. Now, what should I do? I pondered. There was no need to even listen to what Robert wanted. So, ignoring him was an option. But ignoring him wouldn't be fun. And my feelings would remain unsettled. So, I decided to answer the call.
Hello, is that Mary?
His voice was louder than usual. Was he that panicked? Regardless, I responded with a sullen voice. Hello, Robert.
Thank goodness. Mary, please listen to me.
No, I can't. I flatly refused. For a moment, Robert seemed stunned, but he quickly regained his composure and started pleading with me.
Don't say that. It's a once-in-a-lifetime request, please.
At this point, I felt as though I had already won. But, containing my laughter, I prompted him to continue. What is it?
There's something I need to ask.
He relayed to me what George had discussed. But it all sounded too convenient. He didn't say it was George's directive, nor did he mention that the date was already set. He just kept repeating that he wanted to have the debut party and that he would reserve the place. So, I coldly replied, I refuse. I've been kicked out, after all.
It's not like that. It was, well.
Robert began to list his excuses. At this point, I was so annoyed that I raised my voice. Then, if you apologize to me, I might consider attending the debut party.
That is.
He faltered. If you apologize to me, I will consider it. Bye. With that, I hung up the phone. He surely won't apologize to me, no matter what. I was utterly confident in that assumption. Contrary to my expectations, I received Robert's apology on my smartphone. This caused a shift in my strategy. I intended to make the debut party fail, and he was going to apologize to George. I needed to think of another method. While I was making a troubled face, George beside me offered some advice.
How about this for the debut party?
I listened intently to his suggestion. It was a truly interesting idea. Moreover, it could give David and my in-laws a taste of their own medicine. Let's do that. I immediately began preparations. Days passed, and the day of the debut party arranged by George arrived. Of course, I hadn't returned to my husband's family home at all. In fact, I hadn't even been in contact with David or my in-laws. They little suspense won't hurt them. With that thought, I headed to the venue with George. Peeking into the venue, I saw my in-laws being questioned by relatives.
What's going on? She's not here.
That's strange, Robert.
Well.
Robert was sweating bullets. Other relatives were pressing David.
Didn't you leave the house together with your wife?
No, well,
There was no way we could have left together, because I wasn't even living with them. But I felt bad for making them wait too long. I slowly entered the venue with George. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Finally here.
Robert was relieved. On the other hand, David approached me.
what were you doing, Mary?
Preparing for the debut party. What else?
Preparation. But where's Emily?
David frantically looked around, as if he cared after neglecting us all this time. With a sigh, I replied, Emily is being looked after by her babysitter.
Then, the debut party.
I prepared a slideshow. That should be fine. Saying that, I pushed David aside. Then I explained the situation to the gathered relatives. Emily couldn't be brought here, but we've prepared a slideshow for you. As I spoke, a staff member started setting up the slideshow. While confirming their progress, I continued. I'm very sorry, but please enjoy this. At my signal, gentle music began to play. The room darkened, and several photos appeared on the screen. At that moment, a gasp of surprise echoed through the venue.
What is this?
What appeared on the screen amidst the murmuring crowd were photos of David's infidelity. Following that, photos of Robert's affair were displayed.
No way, the worst.
Naturally, seeing the photos, both David and Robert turned pale. However, David quickly sprang into action, trying to stop the slideshow.
Stop it. Don't show this.
Oh, you got what you deserved, didn't you?
Is this your doing? Why would you do this?
David yelled at me. So, I shot back. Because you locked me and Emily out. You changed the locks while we were gone. The venue fell silent. Then, whispers began to spread.
Locked out?
What do you mean?
Amidst those voices, I revealed the conversation about changing the locks. I also mentioned that George was there to witness it.
No, that can't be true, right?
Sorry, but it's true. Since George saw the scene, he cooperated with me, I said, and George nodded.
This is the end.
David crumbled. Turning around, Robert was already in a state of shock.
Going forward, our company is entering the kids business. So, we don't need employees who can take care of their children.
It was because of sleep deprivation.
No excuses. Resign yourself. If not, I'll fire you, even if it causes trouble.
George's determination was formidable. Eventually, Robert and David submitted their resignation letters immediately. After that, I filed for divorce from David. The photos of the affair made the divorce between me and David proceed smoothly. Additionally, David agreed to pay me $20,000 in alimony. Since he had severance pay, the alimony was quickly transferred. I also demanded alimony from the woman involved in the affair, but she claimed she didn't know David was married. She agreed to pay me alimony and is also seeking it from David. It might get messy, but that's none of my concern. It seems Robert and Susan are not divorcing. They wanted to, but David's legal fees depleted their savings. They will sell their house to cover their living expenses and move into an apartment together. Considering the child support my husband owes me, I hope they manage their budget well. Meanwhile, George offered me a job.
We have an employee leaving, so if you're interested, would you like to work with us?
It could go like this. Emily is still young, but I need to work to survive. So, I'm thinking of taking George up on his offer soon. But for now, I want to quietly spend precious time with Emily. After all the trouble, I think I deserve this little luxury.